So yeah, I mean, we're talking real life. We're talking to real people about real things, discussing real problems, coming up with real solutions. This is our life. This is my life. This is real life. Hey, this is Cornelius Lindsay. Welcome to another episode of Real Life with Cornelius Lindsay. I want to answer some of your questions. I've been kind of asking y'all out there in social media world. If you have questions, send them to me. If you've already downloaded, if you already downloaded my podcast on your iPhone, Android, your tablets, whatever it is, there's actually a place on there. It's a section there where you can ask me a question. It'll come directly to me. So if you have questions out there and if you want to send those, I would love for you to. I have a couple questions today that I want to answer. I'm going through these now, so kind of flow with me. Let me see what my first question is going to be. Okay, here we go. It says, Cornelius, now this one says your boyfriend. I don't have a boyfriend, I have a wife, but I'm gonna read the question as it's stated. It says, if your boyfriend doesn't treat you with value and cherish you the way he should, do you think you should continue this relationship? Do you think prayer can change the way he feels and treats me? I believe if a man really wanted you, he would treat you as he wanted you, especially a man of God. Now, these are multiple points here. There's multiple points that I think need to be made in the answering of this question. I'm going to start with the beginning portion of it, and that is, if your boyfriend doesn't treat you with value and cherish you the way he should, do you think you should continue this relationship? It's probably a lot that's going on in the relationship. Is more than I probably really know about to give more of a definitive answer. So this would be more general, a lot more generally speaking. But the thing is that we typically know how we should be honored. We typically know how we should be cherished. And if you don't feel like you're being cherished in that way as which you believe that you should, then there are two things that I would recommend. The first thing is you have to ask yourself, have I communicated over to him? Have I communicated over to him what those values are that I hold right, that I hold to be true, and that I believe I should be treated with? How should I be cherished? Have you communicated that over to him? Have you communicated that over to him in a way that he can understand it, in a way that he has digested it, in a way that he can also articulate it back to other people? The reason why I say that is because a lot of times, it's easy for us to tell people things, but they may not have taken in the information well enough to be able to regurgitate it out intellectually to other people. And it's difficult for me to be able to explain to others what I myself have not been able to conceive for myself and understand for myself. So the first thing is you have to ask yourself, have I really communicated that over to him? The second question is, what are my expectations in this? What is the value that you are seeking? How do you feel like you're not being cherished? Those are important questions that I would honestly encourage you all to sit down with a pastor, to sit down with an elder of the church, a deacon, to sit down with someone who is wise, who is spirit-filled, somebody who can sit down with you and say, you know what, let me ask these in-depth questions, because it could be that some of the expectations that you have in this relationship are not necessarily biblical. Some of the expectations that you have, they may not be fair, and some of the expectations that you have may not be communicated, communicated accurately. I'm sorry, my phone just rang. You can tell how real this is, right? So they may not be communicated. They may not be communicated accurately, but nevertheless, I would recommend that you would start there. Now, here's the thing. If these are my standards, these are my standards, I don't want to cross that border, I don't want to go over that part, then I would highly recommend that you seek to go a different way. It sounds to me like, in the second question you asked, you said, do you think prayer can change the way he feels and treats me? Here's the thing. We don't go to God and ask God to change someone so they can be a benefit for us. We go to God and we ask for God to be able to change them so that he may be of use, so that they may be of use to him. We go and we ask that God may receive glory out of that person's life, but not so much that person can be changed that they can now meet our expectations. That's the same way when you get married. I don't go to God and say, God, would you please fix my wife so that she can be better for me? If anything, I go to God and I say, God, would you please fix me that I may be a better husband to my wife? That I'm always concerned about myself and not necessarily concerned about the other person. So do I think that prayer can change the way he feels and treats you? Then I believe that the only thing prayer is going to do in this particular situation is work on your heart to really see how you treat him. But prayer should never be used as a tool of manipulation to see how God can now change this person to be a better benefit to you. And the last thing you said was, I believe if a man really wanted you, he would treat you as he wanted you, especially a man of God. Well, that is true. I love to tell people this: men protect what they value. Men cherish what they value. I have some friends who absolutely love sneakers, and they love Jordans. Just specifically, they love Jordans. And you know what? They cherish them. They do not take them out of the box. They keep them clean. They don't want you to touch them. They don't want you to walk around them. They're in a very special place in the closet. They won't even put the shoes on. It's just that intense. They take them out. They dust them. I think it's low-key idolatry, but I'm not even going there. If they heard this, hey, I love you, bros. But I mean, this is what they do. But to them, the Jordans are extremely valuable. And you know what? They're willing to protect it because it's valuable to them. And whatever it is, I know guys who love their cars, and they love their car. So they wash it, they clean it, they don't want anybody to get in it. You can't get in it, you can't eat in it, you can't really touch anything in it. It's not even worth riding with them because you can't do anything except sit there and not touch anything. And because they don't want to get fingerprints somewhere. That their car is extremely valuable to them. So guess what? They protect it. Men protect what they value. So if you don't see protection, and if you don't see this desire to truly want to mature, to get to know you, then it could be an indication that you may not be desired and you may not be valued. And if that's the case, then the other thing I like to tell people is this: value doesn't beg. You don't have to convince someone to value you. It really sounds to me, based upon the questions that you are asking, that the relationship, that the journey that you're going down may not be the right step to take. I would recommend that you would sit down with a Christian advisor, that you would sit down with a pastor, an elder, or a deacon, and really begin to talk some of these issues out so that both of you can be heard. But based upon the questions that you're asking, it really sounds to me like you're formulating an idea or an exit plan in your mind to how you can leave, although the questions can be skewed to make it seem as if you want to stay. But it sounds to me really that that you're not cherished, that you're not valued, and you know what, that could be a very quick way for you to exit the relationship. Because I will tell you this: marriage, or the wedding day and marriage, it's not a magic pill. A person doesn't change just because they have on a wedding ring. In fact, marriage can amplify the bad character of the person, because marriage can be seen as either a place of freedom where two people can come together as one and be free together, or it can be seen as a place of confinement where two people come together and then they feel like they're trapped in this cage with one another, and then they're both sneaking, trying to get out. And it sounds to me like if this relationship continues to go in the way that it's going, the two of you are going to be more of a cage than you're going to feel like, hey, I'm free to really be who I am with this person. So I would highly recommend, number one, sitting down with somebody. But number two, it sounds to me like, introduces, it's time for you to leave. The next question I have is, Cornelius, how can you deal with wavering faith? How can you deal with wavering faith? In many times of our lives, our faith can begin to waver. And what this means is that there are times when maybe you're going through trials and tribulations, maybe temptation is coming at you. Things begin to happen in life, and it's where, your belief begins to wane a little bit. It begins to dissipate. It begins to kind of lower down. And what typically what we do is, when that happens, is we revert back to old ways of comfort. We run back to food. We run back to pornography. We run back to all those things that we believe we have deliverance from. We run back to those things because they're a place of comfort. things happen. And that's one thing that you have to recognize. You have to recognize that things happen. God never promised us comfort on earth. And if God promised us peace and prosperity all the days of our life, then he must have really hated the apostles. I mean, you really have to look at life for what it is, and that things will happen. We will have tests. We will have trials. We will have tribulations. In fact, the scripture says that we should rejoice in the midst of tests and trials. We should rejoice in the midst of the testing, because it's helping to produce this endurance, this patient endurance on the inside of us. And now we're able to endure the race. You're learning something. You're maturing because you're able to last. And one thing I like to tell people is this as well. You know, when faith begins to waver, typically it's an event that has taken place that usually means that, you know, because the event is taking place, that you're not able, you may be in a place you feel like, you know, I don't really see God clearly. And if you're in that place, that's the most opportune time to begin to press in more and say, okay, how can I press into this? How can I really, you know, I really want to know God more. I really want to know that he's there. I really want to believe that he's there. And that's the time to press in more to him and not seek to, you know, in our heads, try to walk back from him. So we're pressing in more. You know, when things happen, you have to learn how to adjust, and you have to learn how to adjust quickly. When people die, you know, the rock of the family, then it can be like, oh man, you know what? My faith begins to waver. I never thought that person passed away. I never thought this would happen. And, you know, I just don't know what I'm going to do. Or, you know, the something begins to happen, and, you know, you may feel like, you know, what's against you is insurmountable, and you don't know how you're going to get over that. Or maybe the marriage isn't happening the way that you thought it would be. Or maybe the kids aren't turning out the way that you thought they would. Or maybe, you know, you thought you would get pregnant and you didn't get pregnant. Or maybe this happened and it didn't turn out the way in which you thought that it would. It's important that we check our expectations, or to make sure that we are not expecting more from God than what he has promised us in his word, that we're not expecting him to give us all of our wants, when in fact he's made a promise he'll give us everything that we needed. We have to check our expectations. And then number two, we have to believe, and we have to finally settle in our minds and in our heart of hearts that God is faithful, and that he who is faithful has called us. So God is with us. He doesn't leave us or forsake us. He loves us, and he wants us to get it right. You know, he wants us to continue to seek him. He wants us to continue to thirst after him. He wants us to continue to eat from his table. So anytime you feel like, hey, you know what, my faith is beginning to waver, it's time to say, okay, now I really need to seek him more. Maybe that's in prayer. Maybe that's in reading the word of God more. Maybe that's in the Christian fellowship. Are you around other believers who can encourage you, enlighten you, edify you in the word of God, strengthen you, pray for you, you know, pour into you? Do you have that? Are you in a local church where you are serving regularly? One thing I believe that service in your local church is one of the greatest ways to not only ease the stress of what's going on in your own life, but it helps you to put things in perspective, because now as a servant, you're able to see things for face value. You can see all the problems and issues of the people that you are around, and now you have an opportunity to say, you know what, I really have nothing to complain about. And I don't even know why my faith is even wavering, because I'm serving people who are unfortunately less fortunate than I am. And now I can really see this for what it is, and now I know I can fix my own attitude. So, you know, I pray that helps you. Sometimes that can be a very difficult thing. It can be a very broad thing to answer. So I really sought to condense as much as I possibly could within that answer. Let's get two more, and then we'll be done. The next one is any advice for a young couple who's putting God first in their courtship. I mean, here's the thing. I think that courtship is different from worldly dating in the sense that godly courtship has accountability. That means that the two of you are accountable to one another, not just accountable to one another, but you're also accountable to a pastor. You're accountable to a pastor. You're accountable to an elder in the church. You're accountable to, you know, a godly a married couple who's kind of walking you through this thing. Understand something, that in historical courtship, you know, typically when a man and a woman, when they sat down for conversation, when they sat down to converse, they sat sat down in the presence of her father. They sat down in the presence of the bride's father, so the bride's father could begin to listen to the communication from the potential groom. And the reason for this is you have to make sure that this remains clean, that you're keeping this thing pure. And that's where the accountability comes from. That's also where the protection comes from. That you two have proper boundaries and you're not putting yourself in a position or disposition where you will cause temptation would bring you to ruin. And you don't want to be tempted by something, then run over into something else. And now that you're tempted, now everything begins to just drop down into shambles. And now you're like, oh my goodness, how this relationship can go on because, we did this. Maybe we had sex and we weren't supposed to. And, the new craze is, Pastor, we're not having sex. We're just having oral sex. I hate to break this to you. Oral sex is sex. It's still the same thing. You're penetrating something and it just so happens to be your mouth. So, hey, you do what you want, but it's still sex. But for the young couple who's putting God first in the courtship, you have to make sure that you have godly standards, that you have godly boundaries. There are just certain things that you just cannot do. There's just certain things that you just cannot say. There's just certain places you cannot go. I wrote a book entitled So You Want to Be Married. You can get it off Amazon. You download it on Kindle, in all those places. But the book is entitled So You Want to Be Married. And in that book, I talk about some of the boundaries that my wife and we had when we courted. We didn't kiss each other until our wedding day. You heard that correctly. We started our courtship a year and 8 months later. We actually got married and we kissed each other for the first time on our wedding day. But we had some very strict boundaries. We only went to one movie because the movies is always a very intimate place. It's like when you go there, you want to cuddle. You're all, typically when you go there at night, especially, you're in there with other couples. They're cuddling. It's like you've already had a late dinner. You're getting sleepy and you're already attracted to each other. And, then the hands start to moving in certain places where they shouldn't. And then, all of a sudden it's like, oops, how did we get to this place? And now you're giving the devil an open door. You're kind of leaving the crack in the door and he's busting the whole thing in. So on the way home, you're having conversation that you probably shouldn't have. If the two of you kind of live alone, then, it's like, hey, it's already late. I don't want you to drive home. You might as well just sleep at my house. Oh, you don't have anything to wear. You can just wear one of my shirts and you can do this, you can do that. If you could tell, I've kind of gone through that route before. Thankfully, my wife and we didn't cross that boundary. And the reason being is because we had very strict boundaries. My wife, she lived in New York. I lived in Atlanta. I lived in Georgia. And when she came down to Atlanta to come visit me, in the beginning of our courtship, before we got engaged, she stayed at a hotel and I stayed at home. And then when I wanted something, I'd go and pick her up and something like that. And even in the beginning of our courtship, she rented her own vehicle. So a lot of times she would meet me at certain places. And when we went out with other couples, in groups. We didn't go out by ourselves. We did go to like a botillion, I think. It was like this big ball that we went to. But even when we went there, it was surrounded by a bunch of people. We just never wanted to give the appearance of evil. It's very easy to do that. I lived alone, so when she was at my house, I always had people over, and we would always do things together, so that people would always, we would always have some type of accountability. But you want to have proper boundaries. You want to make sure that you really padlock that relationship as much as you possibly can, so you do not cross those boundaries. So you can make sure that not only the two of you are saying we're keeping God first, but you actually have people around you who are saying, you know what, I see the standard that you two are trying to uphold, and we are here to make sure that you uphold that standard to the fullest. I know it's easy for couples to say, oh, we're strong, and I've heard this one before. Pastor, I'm mature in the faith. I can do this by myself. Whatever. Do not fool yourself. Do not do it. If you've already tasted, if you've already had sex, and I'm telling you, do not put yourself in that situation. Then for those who say, I've never had sex, but that's all you can think about, don't put yourself in that situation. It only takes a very small flame to start a raging fire. And if I were to throw a very small flame on a dry forest, I'm going to have a raging fire. It happens all the time. I think they're probably putting out fires now in certain parts of the country, certain parts of the world, because somewhere along the line, a very small flame was thrown on a very dry forest. And then guess what happened? It started this huge blaze. Sometimes it's very difficult to put out. Well, the same thing happens with lust. It only takes just a drop of it. It only takes just a drop. And then if you've already had sex and then now you're dry from it and you're like, man, I really want some more of it, then it only takes him putting his hand on your knee. It only takes you putting your hand on his thigh. I mean, at some point you have to just make it clear, make it plain. My wife and I, we told each other from the very beginning, you know what? We don't need to test out the machinery because we already know it works. And that's one thing that you have to do. You have to make sure you don't let the small flames just keep trying to ignite themselves on the dry forest, because if so, you're going to have a raging fire on your hands. Then the two of you are going to find yourself having sex over and over again. You're going to feel convicted. Sometimes, most times people feel condemned. They don't feel like, hey, I don't want to go to church because I don't want to hear what I'm doing wrong, because I really like what I'm doing. You want to have a hard heart about it. And then everything just begins to go downhill when it doesn't have to go that way. So you know what? If you're putting God first in your courtship, God bless you. That's what you're supposed to do. That should be the standard in our world today. Unfortunately, it's not. And that's something that we have to rebuild and work on and make sure we're teaching to our children as well. But I hope that advice really, really helped you along your way. The last question I'm going to do for this particular episode is, Cornelius, I run a nonprofit organization. It's been hard because I have a staff of volunteers. They get excited in the beginning, then they start to drift away. What do I do? Woo, man. My wife and I, we also run nonprofit organizations. I'm a pastor of a church. I run a international men's organization called the Man Cave Society. My wife runs an international women's organization called Pinky Promise. And it can be hard because we do have a staff of volunteers. My wife and I, we have several businesses where we have a good number of paid staff. So it can be hard when you have volunteers. I heard a businessman, which whom I greatly admire. He said something that really, rung true to me. He said, it's very difficult for you to elevate. It's very difficult for you to elevate a nonprofit organization just with volunteers. At some point, you have to break down. At some point, you have to pay people for what you want and for what you're really looking for. And that in itself can be hard to do, especially when you don't have the funds that are coming in. Unfortunately, people get excited in the beginning about new things. They probably got excited about the vision in the beginning. You have to think about it. Go back to the time of Christmas. When you received something and it was like, man, that was your new toy. I know for me, I'll receive something. It's like, man, that was my new toy. I really wanted that. And then the only issue was I played with it for about 2 or 3 days. Then I was tired of it. And I'm like, okay, I don't want it anymore. That's because not only are we spoiled and those are first world problems, but number 3, the issue is that we don't appreciate things for what they were when we wanted it. A lot of times it takes us to lose something for us to finally realize the value of what we had in the first place. So you're going to have people who are going to come. They're going to get excited and very excited. They're going to say, oh my goodness, I'm so excited. I really want to help. I really want to do this. I really want to do that. The only issue is that they may not hold true to the standard, because the standard, which is very real to you, all of the vision and the mission is very real to you, although you are personally passionate about it, they may not be as concerned about it. And here's the bottom line that we run into as leaders of these organizations, is because most times they don't see a benefit in it for themselves. In our society, it's very difficult for people to give their all into something they don't feel as though they can benefit from. People can give a great amount of devotion to their job. Why? Because they're receiving a paycheck from it. A lot of times, even in our church, it's very difficult for people to give their greatest assets, their greatest gifts to the church without trying to receive some type of contribution, some type of payment for it. It's hard for you to believe, right? It's like, but why would you? Why? You would understand this, like, But I don't get it. But why won't you just give yourself to something that you know could be of value to you? But for them, they don't see value in it, so they don't give themselves to it. That's why you may call staff meetings for your volunteer organization, which I've done, and then they'll be very lackadaisical about getting to the staff meeting. Maybe they don't get their own time. Maybe they don't answer the phone when you call them. Maybe they don't do this. Even though they hold a position, although they have a responsibility, they don't hold it to the fullest potential. They kind of quit, give up. Oh, I may do it. It's on the bottom of their priority list, and they really don't care because they don't see a valued interest in it. They don't see the same interest in it that you do. And that's something that is a very difficult pill to swallow, but you know what? You have to swallow it. That's the unfortunate thing. My recommendation for you is to, number one, find you a community of other entrepreneurs, find you a community of other nonprofit, business leaders, and be able to converse with them, talk about their, allow for them to talk about their successes and things like that. I think a lot of our issues and a lot of our frustration can be resolved once we get involved with a community who understands our values, understands what we're going through, and they can really begin to help us. So find that community, pray and ask God to really show you that community of people, of men and women who can really begin to help you, mentor you, lead you, and guide you along the way. Number two, stay in the Word of God. You have to be edified. You got to be prayed up, and you got to have your faith. You got to have your faith strong. Because here's the thing, you're the leader of the organization. So you know what? They're going to look to you. I hate to tell you that, but they're going to look to you for the advice. They're going to look to you because ultimately that's just what happens. And you can't be hurt and you can't get upset when people leave, because that's what people do. When they don't see value in it for themselves, they leave. But you know what? You have to make sure that you stay the course and you keep going in the way that you're supposed to go, and you keep doing exactly what God is telling you to do. Do not be discouraged, because let me tell you something. Whomever is out there to benefit for what you have to offer, whatever service that you are offering, there are people out there who need it. So if you quit because everybody else around you is quitting, then you know what? Then that means that the people who really need the service are not going to receive it. So just know that I believe in you. You got to keep going, and you got to make these things happen. Hey, this has been a great episode. Please continue to send me your questions. I'm going to do this a couple more times so I can get this out there to y'all. I love seeing your questions. I love seeing your comments. I love seeing that you're excited about the podcast. Remember, keep sharing it. Send it out to all your family and your friends. Let them know, man, this guy, he's talking on the thing. I listen to it on my car. I listen to it in the gym, whatever it may be. But I really do appreciate you. Remember, Jesus is Lord, and God bless you and your entire household. God bless you. Thank you so much for tuning in to Real Life with Cornelius Lindsay. Hey, if you get an opportunity, please check out my website, www.corneliuslindsay.com. Until next time, remember, Jesus is Lord. God bless you.